good evening. We are looking forward to continue in the Igeres HaKodesh Chav Gimel, the Holy Epistle segment of the Alter Rebbe, which is known as the fourth segment, or which is the fourth segment in Sefer Tanya Kadisha, known by its unique style, the way it's compiled over here, very distinct and different than the other segments, namely the first three, Ukuti Amorim, Sharich Adumuni, Geras HaTshuva. And by definition, these are letters, mentioned many times. The Igeres HaKodesh were actually letters written at different times, focusing and addressing different situations. We did mention as well that the Igeres HaKodesh has its unique backdrop on the overall. You definitely immediately notice the overwhelming message of the mitzvah of tzedakah, or the mitzvah of tzedakah overwhelmingly presented in the Igeres HaKodesh, even though we did mention that there's certain of these letters don't even have the word tzedakah even mentioned. Alter Rebbe addresses other ideas. As an example, in this very Igeres, it's about Limud HaTorah Barabbim. Just a quick example. This is the Igeres about Limud HaTorah Barabbim, but no question that when you learn Igeres HaKodesh from beginning to the end, what is underscored the most is the mitzvah of tzedakah. Backdrop, the Alter Rebbe had a campaign. We mentioned this so many times. Of course, for the newcomers, the Alter Rebbe had a campaign of a tzedakah campaign, raising important funds for the group which made the famous Aliyah with Reb Mendel Horodoker, which was a Talmid Chaver of the Alter Rebbe, and they were going through a very difficult time. The Alter Rebbe had this campaign in order to send funds, and Baruch Hashem, he did succeed with a lot of help, of course, help from the Almighty. A lot of effort went into it, and he did succeed in bringing serious funds to the extent, if you remember the story of Yutis Kislev, this was part of the allegations, in other words, the enormity of funds which Alter Rebbe was able to send to Eretz Yisrael, which was then under the Turkish Empire, was enough to ring this alarm, so to say. The Alter Rebbe is supporting an empire, an entity which wasn't in line with the Russian Tsar at the time. And that was enough as a slander which brought about the arrest of the Alter Rebbe. Of course, this whole so much more to it. There's a lot to it of the Alter Rebbe's arrest, then which brought about Yutis Kislev, or I would add the Yontif of Yutis Kislev. But as we know, and it's documented, it's a whole episode, and part of an important history, the Chabad history, Alter Rebbe, particularly Alter Rebbe, which is the first of the Chabad dynasty. But I'm just pointing out this detail, that it was loud enough and made an important impact, even from the side of the sender, which was the Alter Rebbe, that this was a basis for the case against the Alter Rebbe. That's how successful, if you will, the Alter Rebbe was with this campaign. We did have a whole presentation, and this is what I want to get to here, at the beginning of the 10th epistle, which is by now about 13 back. Easy to find wherever you're watching this class, but namely on the TanyaOnline.com website, which is the original website, which you have access to all the previous classes, easy access to all the previous classes. For the very beginning, not only Igeres HaKodesh, but of Sharich Adumuni, Ukuti Igeres HaTshuva, Sharich Adumuni, Ukuti Amorim, from the very beginning. Also, the way it's set up, as we mentioned, also quite frequently in this particular site, the way it's set up, that the text is on a separate scroll bar, as such, it's easy to follow. But wherever you're watching it, from time to time, we take the opportunity to acknowledge the Arutz Sheva, Israel National News English. It carries us on a weekly basis, and a big koilachai and yeshukach to them. Always truly appreciate it. Just the idea to bring Chassidus, bring the message, the holy message of the Alter Rebbe, the message of Chassidus, to yet another Yid and another Yid. And what's so special, besides the fact that it's an important dimension within Torah, Torah is a Torah achas shlema. We can't cut corners and say, or cut the Torah up and say, this I'm interested, this I'm not. A Yid who really has a connection to Torah has a connection to all parts of Torah. It's an opportunity to obtain this part, to identify with this part of Torah. So this is nothing greater than that, shleimus ha-Torah. But together with that, Tanya was not just another sefer of Torah. Tanya is a Yisod Godel. We spoke about it so many times. We shouldn't take the time. This is a entry. This is a limud, which is by definition of the whole backdrop, who the Alter Rebbe was, this being the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe. A hemshech of the Baal Shem Tov, which this is the hisneitzutz of Eirei Shel Mashiach. And together with that, and really connected, this is we call it so many times, and rightfully so, the perfect manual to Avodas Hashem. The perfect manual. There's so many manuals out there, and each one contributes to our alignment with our mandate, with the On High, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's holy Torah, holy mitzvahs. But then there's a perfect mandate. We give the example the other day, someone buys a very sophisticated device, and he downloads from a site, or Google, as we call it, as we know it, a manual for this device, but it's a complex device. Okay, you'll be able to function, you'll be able to work with it based on the information that you downloaded. And then there is another site which will give you more information. But then there's the information which comes with the device. And that's a total different package. You know so much more how to work and how to function on the device. And precisely when it's a complicated device or a complex, in its function. So you need to know more and to make sure that you're doing it right. And namely also you're able to, with that perfect manual, to allow this device to function with much more perfection, and utilizing every detail within the device to your benefit, for the purpose you bought it for, and not to find out 5 years later, this is maybe another function within the device. I never knew about it, and if I would know, had I known, I would have done to be able to be so much more productive with this very device. So that's the advantage of using the original the original manual, that is, that comes together with the device itself. The ones who put together the device, their manual is a perfect manual. To have the best function, be able to obtain the best function for which you bought it for, and the productivity of this very device, and it's able to navigate all its complexities because they made the device. Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. He came with a whole package of the way the Eibishter created the human being, the way the Eibishter created the Yid. Tells us exactly who the Yid is. We mentioned many times, Alter Rebbe speaks about all these different levels of Yiras Hashem. You never see the Alter Rebbe writing, okay, he's going to go obtain Yiras Hashem. We're not going, or go shopping for Yiras Hashem and grab it and incorporate it into yourself. No. Alter Rebbe is telling you exactly this which you already have, because he knows the neshama. The Alter Rebbe knows the backdrop, because he's the Alter Rebbe. He knows the backdrop of creation, or particularly the human condition, and the Yid, which has to align himself with Hashem's holy Torah and His holy mitzvahs. And we know that it's a whole ordeal. It's not just a little shuckle by a davening, by a learning. This is 24 hours. It's enormously nuanced. Maaseh, dibur, machshava, thought, which is again the subtleties of our nefesh, vision, audio, These are millisecond decisions which a person has to make in order to maintain his alignment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's extraordinarily complex, the system. So you have to know it very well in order to write the perfect manual. And yes, the Alter Rebbe not only knew it very well, he himself, being the Alter Rebbe, he came with the whole makeup of the neshama, namely the neshama, the way it connects with the neshama hamis, the guf, chelkei ba'olam, as we spoke about this so many times. And he's the one writing the Tanya. So by definition, Tanya is a different level of opportunity to Yid to have that seamless relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, we mentioned it so many times. We say this over again when we speak about Sefer Tanya Kadisha. So, as we'd mentioned about the original site, has this advantage, as we just said, but namely the ability to we cross-reference so many of the Alter Rebbe. Let's say Lahabdu because of to Yidin Yidot, but the Alter Rebbe himself cross-references so many times, or quite a bit of times. Like I said, in Chelik Aleph, in Chelik Beis, and then when you're learning about something, and in there where the Alter Rebbe is referring to, it's written in elaboration, so we just send you there, and the website is set up in a way that literally it's a click away from all these different chapters, and you're pretty much, again, with the text bar over here, aligned with every single one of these presentations. It's so easy to notice where you would be holding what you're looking for, and to learn it there. And like I said, we do this the same, and certain times again is arichos, in other words, in length. Certain ideas explains, and we come into it in order to, it says the Torah is aniyah b'makom echad, ashira b'makom echad. Another place it's b'makom sheni. It's another place it's richly presented. So there is the opportunity to save time, but it's not about saving time. It's just to go back to the place where that subject was expansively presented, or presented expansively. So this is the advantage. It takes it really a few seconds when we cross-reference to go to the place which we're referencing. So this is again the advantage. But wherever you're watching and wherever you learn Tanya, so we're holding on page Kuf Lamed Vav, and we spoke about the difference of one person learning Torah, 2, 3, up till 10, but the great virtue and advantage of 10 Yidden learning Torah. What's the difference? So first of all, we find it in Torah. In Chazal tell us, Asara sheyeshvim v'eiskim b'Torah. 10 people are sitting and occupying themselves. What's the difference of 10, 9, 11, 14? You're learning Torah. That's the mitzvah, which is part of the mitzvah. Which is a mitzvah in Torah to learn Torah. And not only it's a mitzvah in Torah to learn Torah, the connection with each other, the Kodesh Baruch Hu through Torah, as in the Alter Rebbe's doctrine, yes, in the very beginning, take a look, in Hey, 5, 23, 37, in Likutei Amorim, I would definitely say anybody wants to see the great advantage and virtue of Limud Torah, even over Kima Mitzvahs, and the Lashon Alter Rebbe Be'elain cases, the union which he has with the Kodesh Baruch Hu through learning Torah is infinitely greater than the union he has with the Kodesh Baruch Hu when he does a mitzvah. The mitzvahs are mitzvahs Hashem. In there they call it Varim de Malka, you're embracing the king. Alter Rebbe says Limud Torah is a total different idea. Again, take a look in other places, but again, these 3 chapters famously. So it's about Limud Torah. So what's the relevance of Asara, 10 people learning Torah? And for that matter, the Mishnah itself says, how do we know that even one person learns Torah? He gets a reward. And the Mishnah goes on. There's also something very great of an individual learning Torah. So you're talking about the idea of learning Torah by definition. There's no greater union of any entity with Hashem in every level. If it's the angels, or if it's, in other words, on every single level of Hashem's creation, even the celestial creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as an example, Malachim also constantly connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the union is not as profound, and nothing close even, remotely close even, and a Yid who learns Torah. Again, look at those chapters. So, from the perspective of Torah, yeah, the union is there and is equal, but there's something advantageous of 10 people learning Torah, as opposed to less than 10, less than a million. Where do we find it? So the Alter Rebbe says, you notice when it comes to less, the Mishnah says about schar, about reward. Minayin afilu echad sheishes b'Torah Kodesh Baruch Hu kevei li schar. Alter Rebbe goes into it again. We began last week. Let's see where we would be holding. Valkain. We'll start Valkain. So that's Kuf Lamed Vav, and the corresponding page would be 270. And Alkain is pretty much in the center of the page. Valkain Yispol Liv Mevak Sheshem Shasateru V'Shasat Tefillah V'Cheitzavah. So when we started this again, I remember that we stopped just in the middle of the flow here to the time constraint. So we're going to start from this Valkain. Again, we read a bit, but just to get a bit of the flow, as we just said, of this idea, of this concept. Alter Rebbe says, look at the wordage of this Mishnah. When the divine presence resides among them, with them. When it comes to one person learning Torah or anything less than 10, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu kevei leischar, Hashem establishes a reward for him. So Alter Rebbe goes into it again. If you remember, which we explained. Again, we explained this quite elaborately. So therefore, let's just start over here, at least till the Hash'av Ashra, that the difference is very stark. When you say that Hashem establishes a reward, Hashem establishes a reward that tells you that it's a limited version, a very much a condensed version of Hashem, the fact that we feel the reward. And as the Alter Rebbe says, this reward is enormous. It brings you excitement and passion and he is able to serve Hashem with a certain ecstasy even. And that expresses the entire package of his. He starts davening. When you say Hashem rewards him because he's involved in the Torah, the davening is a very exciting davening. We all know the difference. And we're not talking about anything external. I mentioned last week, there's no point even to negate something like that. We're talking about true, real excitement. Imagine a neshama invested in a body, invested in a Bahamas, sitting here in this dump of by definition, of course, it's Hashem's garden. It's the Gan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the potential which He is able to reveal with the Ilm Hazeh, that it's not a dump, it's a garden of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this becomes the ultimate abode of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Alter Rebbe writes, this is where the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dafka in this world, vis-a-vis the way the Eibush Hashem is in the Eilam Esalyenim, these spiritual, very high, lofty, truly high, lofty world. This is where Yisab HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Liloi, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu dafka here, but this is post-Aveda, where a Yid cultivates Eilam Hazeh and works tirelessly with toil in order to align the spirit of Eilam Hazeh with the Anhai. Tachteinim, actually, this is Kiboil Yoinim, that the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be identified in this world, similar to the way it's identified in High. That's where you have that's when the party begins. That's when it becomes obvious that this is a garden. But on the surface, say that word, because before Pri-Aveda, the world is a place which is everything less than on the surface, the way it appears, a garden for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You see in the beginning of the Lamed Zayin, look at the definition. Alter Rebbe defines the default reality of Eilam Hazeh. It's anything else than the spirit of Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ani ba'afsiyeh. No, it's not. Rachman on you, Hashem, it's about me. As we know it. That's what Eilam Hazeh is. Post Aveda, the person could transform. He has the koyach to transform and make this 180-degree difference within Eilam Hazeh, and to allow Eilam Hazeh to identify the true Anoichi, the true Ani, the true Anoichi, Anoichi Hashem Alikecha. But that's post the Yid Aveda. So when a person in Eilam Hazeh is able to find that excitement, that ecstasy in Avodas Hashem, in Avodas HaTfilah. He comes, he sits down daven, and he's on fire for real. We're not talking about an external fire, which is, or not even a fire, an external shackle, as we say, and claims to be on fire, and of course it dies down, because there was nothing there, no substance in the very beginning. Again, no need to negate. We're talking about a person who's really on fire in his Avodas HaTfilah. It doesn't have to be also expressed externally, but there's something happening. He's experiencing enormous pleasure of that intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is, that's what tefillah is meant to be. Comes to a mitzvah, he's excited, he's really marching towards the mitzvah. Tzedakah, his limudat Torah, he's able to learn for so many, because he knows that limudat Torah is, again, also the doctrine of the Alter Rebbe, an expression of deep intimacy with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See, in the end of Perek Mem Hey, in Likutei Amorim, the expression of the Alter Rebbe has it later in Mem Vav as well, other places. He's excited, he's on fire. Well, that's stupendous. The Yid sitting here in Elam Hazeh, in Nefesh, in a goof, in a Nefesh Bahamis, and in Elam Hazeh is able to find that excitement that is grander than grand, by definition. Could you think about anything greater than that? The Alter Rebbe says yes. That's already the condensed version of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that you're excited with that, with this which is being manifest to you, that itself says by definition that it's a condensed version of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we mentioned again, I believe last week also, when we learned the last class, because the Shabbos, when they come on high, they celebrate, they have enormous pleasure. Of what? Of the ray of the Shekhinah. Why not the Shekhinah itself? Why the ray of? The ray of usually is a condensed version of what it's a ray of, right? The ray of the sun. So the ray is a condensed version of what the ray is, a ray of, which is the sun. And of course you can't compare by far. So why shouldn't they have a no from the Ziva Shechina, from the Shechina itself? Why the ray of the Shechina? And the answer, explains elsewhere that it goes together. Because if it's hano, if it's pleasure, if it's delight, if it's excitement, so it can't be the Shechina itself. Because the Shechina is overwhelming. We're talking about the Ein Sof. Nothing finite could truly appreciate infinity. A person's bottled for in the face of infinity. One loses himself in the face of infinity, not deriving pleasure from, because deriving pleasure from is you are deriving pleasure from, you're excited. That itself, by definition, says is the condensed version. That's why the Chazal, again, with precision, nani, if it's your hana, it's the Ziva Shechina. We gave an example of a light for you. We gave last week, again, no need to repeat. It's on this, if you're watching the class on this site, it's the class just under. It's lined up. The latter class is on top of the screen, left side, and then it goes there backward, meaning to say low. The class under is the latter class, the one before. So last week, again, you can see it. You have the example of the light. Yeah, the light contributes to your pleasure when you have to read something or do something, but when it's overwhelming amount of light, you really not only don't derive any pleasure, but it's not a good place for you to be. For that matter, it's dangerous for you to be there. It's overwhelming, but we just established that light adds to your pleasure because you want to see what you're doing, so more light would be more pleasure. No, there has to be a condensed amount of light for you to derive pleasure, to appreciate and work with. But if it's overwhelming, so it's not good. But it's the same good which was just been amplified. No one becomes too grand. You cannot have a no. You could be bottled, means to say you lose your structure, your composure. Of course you do, because it's overwhelming light. And again, it would be dangerous. Don't be there. As an example, which the difference is grand. This is a condensed version of the light, and this is the entire light, the entire shine. And that's what it says. When you're already having this excitement, this delight in your davening or in your Torah, in your mitzvahs, that tells you that you connect with already a condensed version of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole Eibishter is Ein Sof. In the face of the infinite, nothing finite could really exist. But when the Eibishter does open up the light of the window to his infinite light, yes, it's not something that would lead to schar, in other words, to this reward, to this pleasure, to this excitement. It may be overwhelming, but that really defines what's really going on. What is happening right now that doesn't even allow you to appreciate that reward and to derive light and excitement of that reward? Answer, it's because it's not a condensed version, it's the whole Eibishter himself. And that is the difference of 10 people learning Torah as opposed to anything under 10. Here it says, not the Ziva Shechina. It's the Shechina Shruya dwells between you. Person learns Torah anything less, or in the Lashon Echad, as an example, one sits and learns Torah, it's grand, it's special. Because Baruch Hu is schar, there it's reward. A reward is something that usually I appreciate. You can tell a child, I'm giving you a reward, I'm giving you this piece of this hammer. It's not a reward. But you know, this hammer is built with a certain metal, and one day you'll become a carpenter. You'll maybe realize, I'm not a carpenter. I want a reward. Or it's going to be, depends if it's a young age, it's a candy, or someone a little more mature. You give them an allowance, a few dollars, they appreciate it. They can go buy something. There's excitement, there's adrenaline because of this. There's the arousal, the adrenaline within the person if it's a big reward, because the excitement is because it's something that the person can appreciate. That's the definition of schar. It's reward. It's reward because it's rewarding. And in the context of schar and avodas Hashem, yeah, I'm excited, I'm enthusiastic about a good davening and a good learning. It's grand. It's very grand as we know it. Not only going through the checklist, but going through the checklist with animation, excitement, ecstasy. It's very grand. Bring him on. I'd like to meet a few around the clock. A Yid has excitement, especially a Yid which is able to daven with a passion, a true passion of what tefillah is all about. It's extraordinary. Of course it is. But this tells you that it's already the condensed version of this lakus, which is being revealed to the person as a result of his learning Torah. Asara sheyesh v'meiskim b'Torah. Then it's not about reward. It's about Shechina, the whole Shechina, the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which you cannot have that regular hana, delight. And the reason is because it's overwhelmed, because it's about the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what are you touching with? What are you connecting with? What are you touching base with? What are you connecting? What level of alakus are you connecting with? Oh, this is a different type of... Just the fact that it's not about the schar, it's not something which is, I feel the reward, or I can identify it. That tells you the grandeur, the loftiness of this Gili, of this revelation. This is the revelation of the Shechina itself, the infinite, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the reason why it's not about you celebrating it, because you cannot celebrate something which is Be'ein Arech, higher than, greater than you. And again, anything fine in the face of the infinite, there's no real connection. So the connection there is, but it's a connection which is coming mil ma'ila l'mata from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, allows us to connect to the Ein Sof, which is of course Be'ein Arech, no comparison to the condensed version, even though the condensed version is something that I could appreciate, identify with, be excited about. An excitement of avodas Hashem again is very extraordinarily grand, but nonetheless it's still the condensed version of it, as opposed to the whole Shechina. So I'm being more consumed into that ambiance of the Shechina, and it's not my personal excitement. Okay, but I'm connecting to a infinitely greater dimension within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the Shechina itself. It's not Ziva Shechina, it's the Shechina itself. That happens when Asara Sheyesh, 10 people sit and learn Torah. Now, just to say that does it have no impact? Of course it has an impact. If the Shekhinah is with you, you're impacted, but it's not reflective directly. Maybe as a famous expression in Gemara, Bechal Masaimana, that within 200 you would always have 100. Always have 100 within 200, of course, right? So, will there be excitement? Yeah, probably. Because there's the dimension of you learning Torah, and not because you're learning with 10, you'd maybe lose out with the fact that had you learned yourself, you would have the reward. Maybe. But here, what you're connecting to is something infinitely greater. So as such, infinitely more advantageous. And all that transpires. And the reason is simply because this is the Ein Sof himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, the Shekhinah himself. Shruya dwells beineihem, because you were 10 people who got together and are learning Torah. Nothing greater than that. Because you're connecting to the true greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not the condensed version, or the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the air comes down condensed in order to fit and to connect with your limited expression of your even very rich faculties, your heart, your mind, which is your davening, your learning, and so on. It's the Shekhinah itself, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By far, there's no comparison. And then the Alter Rebbe, right, this is what the Alter Rebbe continues. When it comes to schar, yeah, you're dancing. As he says, King, the heart of those who seek Hashem, Kodesh Baruch Hu, become excited. Anything similar, it's Torah, it's Tzedakah, or mitzvahs, and so on. Because in the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the heart rejoices. It elates with a elation and song, and their soul derives pleasure from the sweetness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The other version, Alashim. The Eirei and Hashem's light, and Hashem reveals himself, exposes himself. From his garment, concealment of his garment, which means this is the Torah. The Torah is called Levusha Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's brought based on many psukim. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes out of that Levush, which means the light, just like a Levusha garment, covers up, but then you could take up different layers of the garment, so you see more of this which the garment is covering. The Torah is called the Levush because the Eibishter is in with it in his Torah, and you're able to start seeing the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Levush, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah. The Yotzei Baruch Chitzin, and it comes out like a flash, like a lightning. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's arrow, literally translated, that suddenly you start seeing the flash of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's coming out of that levush, which is the idea of reward. Chitzei literally means an arrow, it shoots at you, penetrates. The excitement is real. And that's Kviyas Chara Torah. That's the establishment of reward of Torah. Again, based on this, the Mishnah tells us, this is the Kviyas Chara. Which is always established in the soul, which toils in Torah. The Alter Rebbe continues, the dwelling of the divine presence, the Ora Atzumo Meir Hashem. It's a Ha'ora, which is intense and enormous. Light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Meir Bo Belivu, which shines where the Eibishter, the Shekhinah is for itself, by itself, in its infinite manifestation. Believable v'tachlis, no borders, no limitation. And that, ein yochel yislavish v'nefesh gulis. Of course, that cannot come into a limited soul. Now, we say limited soul, we mentioned many times that one would ask, isn't the soul also has that infinite dimensions? Let it connect. Again, expresses of it as well excitement, because the soul is a chelik al-kavimal mamish, part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So where's the limited soul that it cannot enter into a pnimius, He's mentioned so many times. We say in the morning, the Gemara says, "Kaditz mishos." The person wakes up in the morning. He says, and we say in our daven, "Neshama shnasato b'tahira." Yes, of course, there's taharasa shel neshama, the impurity, adulterated purity. Excuse me, of the purity of the neshama as a way it's part of Atzilus, which is a world which obtains, houses the unadulterated infinity of HaKadosh, purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where neshama comes from. Granted, but atavoroso atitzarto atonafachtabi. There's the Yerididus and neshama maguf. It crosses that quantum leap step from Atzilus to Bria. We mentioned so many times Atzilus is not in a higher world; it's a total different experience, different phenomenon, and that neshama crosses into Ato Baroso, Elam Bria, Atitzarta, Elam Yitzira, Ato Nafachtabi, which is corresponding to Elam Asiyah. And then with Elam Asiyah, there's Elam Gashmi, Elam Asiyah Gashmi. There's a spiritual Elam Asiyah, and then Elam Asiyah Gashmi, and in Elam Asiyah Gashmi comes and took off, and Bahamis, and it hangs around Elam Haza. So the moment it crosses over from Atzilus even to Bria, which is a very holy world, we mentioned so many times, Gan Eden Ha'elyon is in Elam HaBria. Gan Eden Ha'elyon, Tzadikim Yoshvin, and enemies of Ashkina, we can't even describe it. We can't even begin to appreciate what the Gan Eden is. We shouldn't for a long time, of course. But what it is and what the enormity, even Gan Eden HaTachton, which is an Elam HaYitzira, spiritual, holy worlds. But nonetheless, you can't compare it to the Elam Atzilus, the pure, unadulterated, Elokus energy which exists in Elam Atzilus. Then the neshama by default stands with that intimate oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What comes down to Elam HaBriya, it obtains the Bria, the Nivra dimension of Elam HaBriya, even of Elam HaBriya. It then later it obtains the formation of Elam Yitzir, and then Elam Asiyah. So there's a certain Hagbala, limited dimension of within the neshama as it comes down from one world to the other. Therefore, we even call the neshama a balgul v'tachlis. It has its limitations. And then you tell that neshama, gather, take a few of the neshama, sit together, learn Torah. Whoa, you open the window to that infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shechina itself. Shruya b'neiim. It's right there. Not a schar. It's not the condensed version, it's the whole Shechina. Wow. Different idea completely. It's maki, and therefore it cannot come into a pneumius, because again, the infinite, you can't take this table and put it into the cup. You can't. It's much bigger, it's much grander. But even the table is also a limited table. It has its size from the beginning to the end, and it has its limitations. And still you say that it's too grand to go into a small cup. Now, much more something greater, grander. Put a tree into it. Put a forest into it. No. But it also has a certain similarity. It's too limited. They're both limited. But the whole Eibush to the infinite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu does something finite. No, the finite doesn't really, cannot obtain into pnimis, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that level of infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed, it is manifest when 10 people come learn Torah together. Total different idea. But when we ask, so if it can't connect in a pneumius, so what do we gain? Where is the advantage? What is the advantage? Where is the greatness if it cannot connect? Yeah, it connects. But he said, if it's more of a encompassing type of connection. Can't enter a pneumius. Of course not. It's the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it does connect. It connects more of an encompassing, makiv, an encompassing type of connection. Oleh mil mailo, meiresh vadragla, which encompasses the entire neshama from head to foot. Which is again, the neshama, Yiddish neshama beguf there's physically a head, body, but we know the neshama also works when it enters to the yid. The regular nefesh chayunis, but invested in nefesh kis. The Rebbe points it out clearly, illustrates the idea. And Kuti Amorim, especially particularly towards the beginning of the Kuti Amorim, the first section, and later on, there's reish and regel within the neshama itself. The Reish Regel, with the way the Neshama enters into the person, which also has a Reish Regel, and there's a Reish Regel among Am Yisrael as well. This Makif, Milmayla Meresha, from head to foot. But it's Makif, can't enter into a Pnimis. Of course not, as we said. This is the Eibishter himself, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what are we, in the end of the day, connecting? We're connecting with this which is transcendent, which cannot come into a Pnimis, which is the greatest. Not only great and grand, it's the greatest. It's the Ein Sof of Hashem. Like Chazal say, Akol Be'asara Shechinta Sharya. When 10 Yidden come together, the Shechina dwells Koleimar, and it says there, Aleihem. Like it says, V'noyam Hashem Oleinu. The sweetness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to dwell Oleinu on them. And also there it says, by Asara Sheyeshim, Asara, Kol Be'asara Shechinta Sharya, and there it says, Akol Be'asara. And there also there is Aleihem in different Mamarazal. When it comes to 10, it's Aleihem. What is Aleihem? Why not in them? The Pnimiusum, no, not this level of Shekhinah, that cannot come into a Pnimius. It's too grand. It's the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore we have the Lashon. V'noyim Hashem Elokeinu Oleinu. U'maisi Yodeinu Keinenu. What does it mean in our hands? Keinenu Oleinu shall be mitkonen, which means established. And there also the Lashon says Oleinu, because when it comes to Noyam Hashem, the sweetness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that cannot come into a Pnimius. That ought to be Oleinu, above, because of its greatness, because of its Ein Sofness. The sweetness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which appears through the actions of our hand, basically by mitzvahs. When we occupy ourselves in Hashem learning Torah and Hashem the mitzvahs, the rise of which what is Torah? Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are one. Yisbein, where does Canaan? It would be established with Shade Oleinu and dwell upon us milmaila from above. Liyei say believe with It would also, of course, only be from above, because you're talking about the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is believable with tachas, without any borders, without any limitations. You're talking about the Ein Sof itself. It doesn't enter into our soul, into a pnimis v'sichleinu, in our intellect. And therefore it's impossible to perceive with our intellect the sweetness. Similar lashon ni'imut and arevut, minayim Hashem, the sweetness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says the Rebbe, he's talking about the Shechina, believable with Tachlis. Why would he say Ziv over here? Because he's not, that's what there's so much focus on, of the Shechina, which again is manifest. He's not looking over here, he's not saying the Ziv in its generic form, Ziv, the ray of, as we just explained. Because then there's Nahano, Nenem is Ziv Shechina. Yeah, there's a Shechina, the condensed version, you can't have a No, you can have pleasure. Not the Shekhinah itself. So he's saying the Ziv Shekhinah, this in the context mean of the revelation of the Shekhinah itself. The Noyim Hashem, no, it ought to be Oleinu, B'derech Makif, all encompassing, cannot enter into Pnim. The Ziv Shekhinah believable v'tachas, Hashem Yizbein, Hashem Yizkein, B'sheir Oleinu, which is established and dwells among us, B'maisi Yodeinu, Potato mitzvahs, in our actions of our hand, we're learning Torah. Barabim dafka, when we learn Torah, barabim. What do you have? Shechina, not the ray of the Shechina. Not kavei alei sachar. Kavei alei sachar means to say it's fitted. It's tailored to you, therefore you're excited about a lukus. One would argue, say, oh, here I'm excited about a lukus, here I can't really be so excited because it's overwhelming. But it was, okay. So besides the fact we said usually b'chal masay mana, if you learn Torah individually, you'll have that excitement. When you learn Torah with 10, it won't diminish, because at the end of the day, you're learning Torah with 1 when you learn Torah with 10 as well. Of course you'll get that schar, but here the Mishnah is telling you something totally grander, greater by all measures. There's no comparison to the kviyas schar, which again, naturally you're also being rewarded, and you feel the reward because you're appreciate the condensed version of the Shekhinah. But together with that, you know what's really happening outside of Shiyeshvim? Shekhinah Shem, the whole entire Ein Sof. Whoa, that's infinitely great, infinitely different. But I can't get excited directly from it yet. It's not about your excitement. It's about what level is connecting with you. The Shekhinah itself, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu itself. It's totally different. When does that happen? Barabim Dafka. When there's 10 people coming together. At least. Chazal tell us, Chazal tell us that true reward in this world does not exist. Yeah, famous Gemara. Rashi brings it. He says, sometimes we don't see the immediate reward. There's again this simple meaning. Where's the reward? Gemara even brings a story with the individual which was doing 3 mitzvahs at a time. He was doing, I think it was a double mitzvah at a time. It says that you'll have longevity, and it didn't work out that way. And the Gemara says, he says, again, Rashi brings it because, but what's this Leil Mabah? Why not in El Mazah? Why not in this world? Why not to receive this in the word in this world? He says, this world is finite, and you cannot appreciate true reward of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is infinite. That's the simple meaning of these Gemaras, many of them, Medrashim. And again, Rashi brings us, there's no real reward in this world because this world, which has not only the common denominator with all elements that they're defined and they're limited, it covers up of the unadulterated purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and much more does it cover up. Depends what Olam we're talking about. The Olam Abriya doesn't cover up covers a lot in comparison to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which usually is manifest in Olam Atzilus, but nonetheless, you can say totally covering up of the of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Olam Abriya. No, Olam Abriya is Tzadik Meshav Nenes B'Shechina. There's Gan in Olam Abriya. Nonetheless, it's still an Olam. Olam, Gemara says, Moshe Helam Behester. It covers up of the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much more? It's Olam Yitzira, Masiyah, Masiyah Ruchni, it's Olam Hagashmi. Olam Hagashmi, yeah. It's all about Helam Behester. So you could say, expecting a world of Olam, which is Mailam Master in the reality of HaKadosh. You have the Schar of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Olam. No, Schar Mitzvah B'Hayam Malek. Because you have Shalom Olam Masiyah. The world cannot perceive this reward. And that only works in the nefesh has to be divested from a body. And here he's talking about namely that Helam has to exist in Elam Haza when the neshama enters in a nefesh bahamis, in a guf, in chelke ba'elam. It has that confinement because of the guf itself. To receive something with reward has to be the leaving, the departure of the nefesh from the guf. The divestment, divestment of the neshama from the guf becomes free then. It doesn't have the confinement limitation of the guf. Oh, there you could feed it, connect some reward with that nefesh, the reward with the nefesh. Schar mitzvah b'hayam muleka, but when once the nefesh leaves this world, it could obtain that reward on the overall. And even then, gaf gamzei so derech chesed, special kindness that Hashem makes it work, makes the reward connect and be appreciated by the nefesh. Where do we see it? Like it says, Hashem, you have so much kindness that you're able to pay men like this for this which he's done. Why is it chesed? He deserves it. Why is it considered chesed? No, because you're talking about even a nefesh which is divested of body. It's also an effort to work, to connect the reward with that nefesh. So it's also chesed b'kodesh baruch hu, but nonetheless, it has to be, the Gemara says, it has to be schayim b'hayam maleka, because here there's obtains a new level of helam v'hester, of confinement, of limitation. The finitude of the body, the nefesh bahamis, which confines the neshama, schar, in this world, doesn't make sense to work, and it doesn't. It can be, there's certain ideas, Al Rebbe explains in the 3rd chapter of Yigeres HaKodesh. Take a look, 3rd chapter of Yigeres HaKodesh. There are certain mitzvahs, which is, as we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu pays reward also in Elam Hazeh. We say, Adam Mechal Peder, say in Elam Hazeh, How is that supposed to work? We just said schar al mitzvahs b'hayal malekah, and it makes so much sense that it shouldn't really not work. So the Alter Rebbe explains what is so unique about those mitzvahs, that they're able to be manifest, the rewards are able to be manifest in this world, which is again something very grand. We've got to understand it. Take a look in Peri Gimel in Geras HaKodesh in this fourth segment. Click away if you're watching this site or wherever you're watching, wherever you have access to Tanya. That's the chiddush of these mitzvahs. Usually, no, how can it be? Then that vest from the gulf, then started connecting with schar, and even then you need the chesed of to make it work, based on what we just explained before. Even in Gan Eden, Baruch gives the koyach tzaddikim in order to be able to appreciate the reward. But that is all explaining us why is it this so difficult. Because you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and by definition he's infinite. So sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows that the Ziv HaShechina to manifest from him. Like the sun. The sun is, if you sat with him too close to the sun, reading a book and, oh great, so beautiful, it's so bright, and so no, only great, and probably you'll be physically burnt up from the overwhelming heat and lightness and brightness of the sun. That with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even something, the condensed version is also a little overwhelming. We say, even Shmai is Nizkov is exalted. Only Shmai is Aleretz V'Shamayim. That's Chassidus Taiches. So how much more so when you talk about 10 people coming together and learning Tasarish Yesh Mesik Batera, and the Eibush, the promise is Shechina Shere B'Neim. Whoa, this is something which is incomprehensible. That the Eibush is opening the window of what? His own infinite light to us down here. When 10 people come together and they open a Gemara or an Ein Yaakov or Kitzur Shulchan Aruch or a Sefer Chassidus and they learn Torah, the Eibush exposes himself, the way he forms himself by himself, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what's happening? Answer, yes, that's what's happening. That's what the Mishnah is telling you. Which tells us how special it is. Right when 10 Yidden come together. It's already a kol be'asar shchinta shari. How much more so when they actually learn Torah together. Something which exposes himself the way he forms himself by himself. But it's only akol. It's only Oleinu. Okay. That's by definition. It can't only be Oleinu. It cannot enter into Pnimius. Again, as we mentioned before, two things that are finite, one a bit grander than the other, cannot enter in something which is smaller than it. Two things which are finite. And how much more something the other thing is grander, we can't, like I say, put the table into a cup, impossible. But the whole infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into Pnimius, into the finite nefesh, again, it obtains that level of finitude when it crosses from Atzilus to Bri Yitzir, and it enters the Guf, and then of Shemah Mitzin Elam Hazeh Agashmi, but the whole infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, it cannot enter into Pnimius. Okay, can't. But it's happening. If it's b'derech makif in more an all-encompassing manner, but we're right there. The Eibush Shechina, the whole infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, comes right and is manifest when 10 Yidden come together, and then they sit and learn Torah. Do they have to learn Torah in order to reach this level of Shechina? We say a kol be'asar shechinta shari, when a minion comes together, right away they have the Shechinta, which is Sharia. Why do you need to learn that Torah? No, because when you start learning Torah, then Torah, which is then it becomes even more and more revealed, that connection with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. course, because it comes from the Torah. But you have the idea of the number 10, which establishes something totally different. Totally different. The Rebbe is going to say over here, hopefully we look forward to continue, but Malachim, it says, that's why, as the Rebbe brings from the Magid, one Malach stands among 10 Yidden, completely, even they're not talking Divrei Torah, words of Torah. He loses himself. This is a Malach, and here you have the manifestation of the Shekhinah, the Ein Sof. How can a Malach, which is as well a finite, created being, that's what a Malach is, yeah, it has enormous kaiches. It's a Malach Hashem. A Malach is a Malach. Make no mistake. But at the end of the day, it's a defined and as such a limited or creation of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which has its parameters, borders, its limitation. It's a nivra of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So the Alter Rebbe brings from the Magid that a Malach comes into an area where 10 people gather, even they're not talking Divrei Torah. Which one might ask, what do you mean they're not talking Divrei Torah? You have to learn Torah every single moment. The Barta Bam V'lei B'dvarim B'Teilim. A person is not allowed to be without Torah. So what does it mean 10 Yidden come together? They're not speaking. Alter Rebbe says, Einim Medaber Divrei Torah. So it says there's certain circumstances where they're not meant to learn Torah, as an example. They're in a meeting for a communal manner which had to be addressed. So they come together and they have to address this idea in order to correct it, to fix it. Each one's going to open up a Gemara. They'll come into the meeting. They'll leave the meeting the same way they came in, and the matter will be corrected. And it's accompanied by leaders or Yidden B'chlal to make corrections in community, society. There's so many ways which, according to Torah, they're not meant to talk Torah. As an example, comes the Magid and says, yes, at that moment when the 10 Yidden come together, you have the Shekhinah there. So a Malach would stand in awe, trepidation, as the Lashon over here, of right now, the Ein Sof, which is manifest. Why? Because 10 Yidden came together. Association. Even before there is Kimbatei. How much more than when there is Kimbatei? Akol be'asara, Shechinta Shari. Shechina, the whole Shechina. And therefore the Malach would lose himself. Even they're not talking Divrei Torah. How much more so they are talking Divrei Torah. And Alter Rebbe is going to get to how careful we have to be when we stand around 10 people. When there's the formal minyan, then the Chas v'Shalom to appreciate what's happening. You have the whole Shechina over here. Alter Rebbe is going to get to the idea not to be careful, not to talk. Certainly not in the middle of davening. When the Shechina is really trying to connect with us. Even b'derech makif, but not before davening, not after davening. And sometimes the custom we have would come like you're just a little more loose and frivolous even after that. No, the Shekhinah is there. The whole Shekhinah, be careful. And what are we meant to do? Sit down and learn with 10 people right after davening, because the Shekhinah is there. We want to hold on to the Shekhinah. So the same people who sat and daven together with a minyan, because we're careful with davening the minyan, know that the Shekhinah is right there. So now, learn Torah together. But one thing, identify what is transpiring now. You have the entire Shekhinah right there. The Rebbe says how careful we have to be in a shul, people, time when the minyan comes together. Later, the Rebbe says how important it is that we partake in the shir barabim, not to make it obvious that we're walking out with our particular learning that we're doing, especially when we're sometimes the 10th within this class, and we'll just walk away. Don't walk away. You're making up the minyan. And even as a minyan without you, join. Because there's something grand happening more than your particular learning individually. Because it's schar, yes. But the Shekhinah, the whole Shekhinah is right there. So where are you going? Shekhinah also appreciates the idea that we get together and we learn. And Rebbe speaks about the study. There used to be the custom after davening, the evenings or in the morning. You used to get together, learning Yaakov. Come, join. Allow the Shekhinah, the entire Shekhinah, to to remain, to get comfortable about with the 10 people. And by extension, the whole domain, and it becomes, as the time goes on, you can see people who do learn Torah in unison, shiurim, barabim. There's something very much elevated in the whole ambiance of that shul or that get together. It's you could sense it. Now you can sense it. So it's not the Shekhinah like we just said. So it doesn't mean that you don't have any ability to sense what's going on. It's the idea that you cannot define it, which could be defined when a person becomes excited in that subsequent davening because he's having learned Torah himself. He takes a das sitter and he's already dancing. Yeah, right there you could connect it. You can't define the lukus, but nonetheless you could hold on to it because of the condensed version of lukus. But here you have the entire Shechina. So therefore it's beyond schar, even though we just did say the Bechal Masaimana. Of course, the idea of that individual learning which exists when 10 people come together, of course you have it. So you have the schar, you have everything, but there's something grander happening over here. The Shechina is there, day in, day out. It becomes a different type of place. And particularly when the Yidden are sitting and learning Torah, to begin, and the Alter Rebbe's message on the onset to the people who are part of the minyan. There's no room for any frivolity. I'm not talking about extreme frivolity, but any looseness. The Shekhinah is there, says the Alter Rebbe, and what he's going to get. And then on the active side, join the learning Torah, barabim, for the grand result which transpires when the rabbim come together. You have the entire Shekhinah, not only the Ziva Shekhinah, not only particular schar. It's way infinitely greater because you're talking about the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the Shekhinah itself.